This man has been in this position for 3 days and 3 nights, but he doesn't dare to move a muscle because there is a deadly mine beneath his feet. If he moved, he would be blown to pieces like his teammates. The man breaks down. He cries out at the top of his lungs, but his teammate is dead. He still had to try to live. It took a long time for the man's mind to settle down. He slowly bent down on his knees. He took out his knife and tried to pry the mine out, but after a long time he found it was buried very deep. This was not going to work. He looked around and remembered that his teammate had a radio in his backpack, so he untied his shoelace and tied it to his engineer's axe. He tossed it with all his might. He tries to pull the radio out of his pack, but he almost falls to the ground with the effort. But then he held his breath and steadied himself. Then he slowly pulled the pack to him. Fortunately, it was still working. The man immediately called headquarters for help, but the reply from headquarters was, a huge sandstorm was coming. They would be there in 52 hours at the earliest. The men looked ahead at the clear skies. He didn't believe them. As he pleaded with HQ to get help as soon as possible, the radio suddenly ran out of power and stopped working. The man had no choice but to replenish his strength and wait for them to rescue him. But just then a gust of wind suddenly blew. The man looked up and was shocked. He saw a huge sandstorm rolls towards the man, but he didn't choose to run. Instead, he took out the gauze from his backpack, wrapping his mouth and nose. He sticks his gun in the sand. He uses the gun to support himself as a tripod, because he had stepped on a mine under his foot. If he let go of his foot, he would be blown to pieces. Even though his nose was soon filled with sand, he didn't dare to move his position at all, because his wife was still waiting for him at home. He didn't want to put his life on the line here. I don't know if it was because God took pity on him. Soon the huge sandstorm disappeared without a trace. As he watched the weather suddenly become clear and sunny, the man immediately took off his gauze. He looks around. He pulled his teammates over to remove the batteries. He thought he could radio for support again, but when he turned his head to check, he found the radio had been blown 10 meters away by the sand. Despite the man's pain, there was nothing he could do. All he could do now was wait quietly for help to come from headquarters. As he drank the last drop of water, the man could not stand it any longer and fired his gun in anger, hoping that someone would come to his aid. But he screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. But there was no answer. Luckily, he made it through the night, but his presence in the desert soon drew a crowd of wild dogs. In the nick of time, the man manages to scare the dogs away with a mine, although his sense of combat got him through to dawn unscathed. But he was hallucinating from hunger. In this moment of desperation, a scorpion crawls up to him. This man picks a poisonous scorpion. He doesn't eat it in one gulp. Instead, he took a bag full of urine and drank it down, for he has been trapped in the desert for 30 hours, with a deadly mine under his feet. One move and he'll be pulverized in an instant. But after so long without moving, he began to hallucinate and talk to himself. He even saw his blown-up companions come back to life. But as time went on, he made it to the end of the night. But then a pack of wild dogs suddenly swarmed and attacked him. By the next day his gun was empty of ammunition. And that's when the radio, which had lost its power, suddenly spoke. He was told that the headquarters would not arrive until the afternoon. There was a sudden gunshot behind the man. The man saw the enemy coming from all sides. The men immediately pulled out their pistols and fired indiscriminately at the ground. The exploding mine sends sand into the air. A huge smoke bomb was created. After a couple of hours, the rescue team finally arrives. But in the endless desert, the rescue team can't find him, just circling back and forth in the desert. The man looks at a flare 2 meters ahead. It was close but out of reach. He was determined to get the flare even if he had to die. But just as he takes this brave step, the mine did not go off. With a question on his face, the man slowly digs up the mine under his feet, only to discover that what was underneath was not a mine at all. Instead, it was a broken jar. Looking at the broken jar that had trapped him for 3 days and nights, the man wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Afterwards, the man fired a flare. He was successfully rescued by the rescue team. Through this he learns the value of life. This film tells us, no matter how difficult the road ahead is, we must be brave enough to take the next step. If we don't take the next step, no matter how short the road is,